Welcome to the Table podcast series with Bridget Johnson. Each month, we give you game-changing conversations about K-12 education and leadership. Join us as top educators, field experts, and administrators share actionable strategies to transform your school community. Let's dive in.
Welcome to The Table, the podcast where student-led professionals, educators, and changemakers come together to share stories, insights, and ideas for building communities where everyone belongs. I'm your host, Bridget Johnson. Today, I'm welcoming back someone who I just had the opportunity to co-present with at the ASNE workshop for student life leaders, Dr. Brooklyn Raney. Brooklyn is a leadership researcher, educator, and speaker who specializes in trust, boundaries, and relationship dynamics. She's the author of One Trusted Adult, How to Build Strong Connections and Healthy Boundaries with Young People, and she just released the second edition, which is so exciting, which includes new insights and frameworks based on what she's learned since the first edition. Today, we're talking about what it really means to be a trusted adult for young people, how to build strong, authentic connections while maintaining healthy boundaries. And we're also diving into what we explored together in our recent workshop on recentering student life to serve both student development and staff well-being. Brooklyn, so good to see you, my friend. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, gonna dive right in. So we just co-presented together at ASNE, the recentering student life workshop, and ASNE is for the Association of Independent Schools in New England. For those who aren't familiar, we had a great time there. What was energizing or surprising about that conversation with student life leaders for you?
For me, I was surprised by the level at which they wanted to have the conversation. So I think you and I ahead of time were discussing, we were both deans, we were both working in independent schools. We would show up to these events. And at least for me, I wanted to sit next to another dean and say, what's your policy around vaping? How do you select advisors? How do you select student leaders? I want to get into the nuts and bolts, the nitty gritty of understanding how other schools do it. What are the trends you're seeing in student life? What can we adjust? How can we respond? And you and I both had this desire to rise up these student life professionals to think about their role and the piece of school that they are responsible for, which is obviously integrated to every other piece. But I believe that you and I really were like, can we get them to be talking about systems and feedback and truly recentering and making big change, whether that be mindset changes or true change to policy and structures. And I was really surprised because I know what I was like in January as a dean. Was I available for that conversation? And over 70 people showed up and absolutely were. And I was blown away at the insights conversation that we had. And I learned so much.
Same. It was really great to be in a room with that many folks. That time of year, because that's a little bit of a tricky time of year to do professional development, but that's another whole conversation. So, the
when
workshop,
is a good time? I mean, when?
I know, right? But, January, especially like right after the break, it seems like people are like, oh my God, there's, re-entry is hard. And, we talk about January being like the longest but shortest month of the year in terms of just how it feels. Like I always say like January 51st, but, and getting that many people to show up to talk about student life issues, I think really says something about like how people are feeling about those particular folks in those lanes, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. And we talked about the issues, but we also talked about the possibility.
Yeah.
What with your assessment, student life assessment, and the framework that I've discovered through my research and put in the new book, like there was this blend of talking about if we shift our thinking and use these assessments to gather us information that inform our decisions and how we move forward, what's not possible? Where can we go with
Exactly. Where can we go? And so, talk a little bit more about the workshop. It focused on building more intentional, sustainable practices that serve both student development and staff well-being. And so, we don't talk about that enough, but why is that balance so hard to strike, but also so necessary right now?
The needs of young people feel like they grow and grow and grow and grow. And whether that's true or not, I'm not sure. We're certainly in interesting times. Parent rights debates, young people experiencing the least number of intergenerational relationships than ever before, a deemed mental health crisis, name the crisis of the day, the news feed, technology
Right.
trends. Like, certainly the world is changing and times seem incredibly tough. But I think the needs of youth do remain the same. And I use a basics model to remind myself, like, what need is that young person trying to achieve right now? And I think those needs that don't change generation to generation are belonging and membership, ability to contribute, safety and structure, independence and control, competence and mastery, self-awareness and connection. And so crisis of a generation, whatever's going on in a certain period of time, are certainly going to push and press on that and make it difficult to do our work. But I really do believe there is a theme that spans generation on what young people need. But when it feels like what they need is more, and they're showing up to school and they're demanding through their behavior or truly demanding more, educators who are well-intentioned, caring human beings who entered into a field to serve young people feel like they should do more. And what I see is adults making themselves more accessible, adults doing more to show their care with no understanding of the limits of that, or feeling permission to set boundaries around that. And so I don't know about you. I did not get a course offered to me called How to Build Authentic, Productive Relationships with Other People's Children that promote academic growth and positive youth development, while not draining my wallet, compromising my wellness, or leading to burnout. That course was not offered.
All the things. It did not. It still does not exist.
All the time to educators, and there's an immediate laugh like, no, we didn't get that. We got a lot of training in pre-service teacher training to prepare to be educators, and we get ongoing professional development training. But I'm doing this work and this research to fill a gap that I experienced, which is, how do I do this work and reach young people and build the types of connections that promote academic growth and that there is a positive academic outcome without burning myself out? So that friction, really, I think at the heart of it is around expectations, and schools, parents, and kids, students understanding, like, what is the true role of an educator and what can we expect and what should we go elsewhere for? What needs is a school not responsible to meet? And where else should we go to get those needs met?
Those lines have definitely blurred now, for sure. I mean, I think, and it was really interesting. I can't remember where I was having this conversation, but there was a time when it was clear what purpose of school was for, and then you had your community, you had your church, and you had other things that kind of fed into you. And now it seems like the school is the place for all of those things, and we're trying to be everything for everyone, and that can be exhausting,
absolutely,
and not sustainable.
No.
So there's that.
Yeah.
Now, you have just released the second edition of One Trusted Adult. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What made you realize it was time to revisit and update the book?
So book came out in 2019, which doesn't feel like that long ago.
But in some ways a lifetime ago.
What has happened since 2019? You could probably think of a few things impacting
one or two.
Society, education, the United States, the world. So in so many ways, the first book that I wrote was the why. So I stepped away from day-to-day education, still felt like an educator, camp counselor, mentor, coach, still played that type of role in many spaces and places, but was not part of a school community, which was a wild experience in and of itself. If you've been in education, especially for over 10 years, and then you step away that fall when everyone goes back to school.
You're like, woo, twiddling my thumbs over here. Not sure what's happening.
Right. So in 2018, 2019, I poured myself into understanding, why did I need to step away? What wasn't working for me? What skills and tools did I not have for setting appropriate boundaries to make the work sustainable for me? And also, what was the organization, institution, idea of education asking of me that they shouldn't have been? And knowing my heart, my passion is in ensuring every young person has a trusted adult in their corner, because I saw the significant difference in a young person's life and their approach to school when they could name those adults. I know that's always my mission. That will always be what I do. But to put words to it and to write a book about it from my vantage point was really, again, as an educator, as a coach, as a parent, as a mentor, as a camp counselor, it was my immediate reactions to like what I was experiencing, how I had grown up, the adults who showed up for me, and then how I saw adults showing up for young people today. The second that book came out, I felt like I began writing the second edition because I had the opportunity from there to speak in so many schools and so many youth serving spaces, adults across the globe, focus groups with young people, like the data generated from after writing the first book, the conversations, the people that reached out, the stories I was told, I just kept accumulating all of this information, the good, the bad, the hard, all of it. And then actually entered into a doctoral program to really dive in and specifically study teacher-student care and the ethics of care in schools. And so not only was it my academic research that felt like, okay, I have this dissertation, this footing, this brand new information and research. I want to get it to people, but also I have 7 to 8 years worth of stories from educators and coaches and mentors in the world today, and a new framework. So it just felt like I have all this information and I really need to get it to people who can use it.
Awesome. So what's the difference between the first and the second editions? I mean, you talk about all this information that you were able to glean and the kind of real life stories that you had and the academic work that you did, but what did you add, change, or expand based on what you learned?
In a lot of ways, it's a whole new book. I don't think that's how you're supposed to do a second edition. And the first book's still such value. But the second edition really moves us from the why to the how. And the first section's all about the how to build trust. The second section is all about how to maintain the boundaries as a part of that trust. And then the third is really programmatic, and specifically for schools and youth serving organizations, mentorship groups, teams, et cetera. What programs and policies can we build in that actually promote the kinds of relationships that we know from the research are gaining the right kind of academic gains and positive youth development? So, for example, I didn't think about celebration and evaluation in depth in the first book. How do we celebrate the right types of relationships and evaluate the right programs to ensure that we're signaling to everyone what we mean by teacher-student care or adult-to-student relationships at school? And one of the stories I heard from a state was that, like a state education department, was that the teacher of the year, the person getting their top award 3 or 4 years in a row, they actually left education after receiving that award.
That's
and
crazy.
We dug in on why, how does this happen? And you read the speeches and you read the nominations, and it's like they went above and beyond the call of duty. They did home visits. They were at every student's game. They went to every single production and show. And you see what's being celebrated, which is absolutely unsustainable. So they achieve the pinnacle of their field. They get teacher of the year. They're celebrated. And then they leave. And not only do they leave and we lose that incredible educator, but all the other educators are looking at that as the model. Like, that's what we're being told by our supervisors, our bosses, that's what we're supposed to be.
That's the model.
And so I'm going to achieve, I'm going to work for that. And so it's not just a fast track to burnout for that one person, but for everyone in that system involved. So that one story, again, I never would have had that conversation with the Department of Education if not for the first book. And then to hear how this was applying, they actually came back and said, we want to build an adult advocate award based on your model of being accessible, boundaried, and caring. And that shift is changing everything, because that shift is putting the emphasis on celebrating educators who, yes, make themselves accessible to youth, but also maintain boundaries. And yes, absolutely care for young people, and also recognize the limits and boundaries of that care.
I love that, the ABCs. So for people, we're going to take a step back just a little bit. So for people who aren't familiar with the book, let's ground this in the core idea of what does it mean to be one trusted adult for a young person, and why does it matter so much?
It's a great question. It's a big question.
I know.
And I laugh because obviously the book is called One Trusted Adult. My mission is one trusted adult. But it's not. It's many. I joke that at least should be at the top of the book. At least one trusted adult, because, and again, I laugh because different people interpret that term differently. And it's
Sure.
based on their own experiences and what they've read, and these horror stories, like so many things influence how people receive that title and that name of an organization. And so immediately I always say one trusted adult is when we see a significant change in the risk a young person is facing, but also the promise and possibility. When there is one, when a young person can name at least one adult that they deem trustworthy and who is truly trustworthy in the spaces where they spend the majority of their time, they are less likely to drop out of school, less likely to suffer from mental health issues, less likely to bully or be bullied, on and on and on, right? The risk factors decrease. We also see that they're more engaged in not only their academics, but in their community. We see positive mental and physical well-being, multitude of benefits. So all hinging on this one. When there is one, we see the biggest change in the data. When there are many adults in a young person's life, trusted adults, we see an increase of all of the good.
Nice.
So one is the biggest change. So the one is the minimum, the bare minimum. Many is better. And I want to make sure that it's clear. Someone told me one, that's limiting. Like, no, one is the minimum. Many is better. And so we call it build your bench. When we talk to students, we say build your bench of trusted adults, mentors, coaches, teachers, parents, guardians. And I also want to be really upfront that this work, the foundation of this is that parents and guardians are the number one caregivers and educators of their children. Our work as educators, coaches, mentors is to supplement that work, not to supplant it. And so in today's times, when there's fear around this adult is trying to wedge a gap between me and my child and do X, Y, or Z, or whatever the accusation, we have to be really clear. Parents and guardians, number one caregivers and educators, we supplement their work.
Nice. And that's a great segue into my next question, talking about healthy boundaries, because building strong connections, but also healthy boundaries, so important. And why are both essential, and why do people struggle to hold them together?
Trust requires boundaries. And that, like, one of the big learnings for me in this work, I say it's research, but a lot of it is me search. How do I better my practice? What informs me? One of the things I had to really learn and settle on and agree to is that trust requires boundaries. Boundaries are not mean or bad. I think boundaries are a beautiful thing. I wish we spoke about boundaries like a renovation to your kitchen or a new haircut. Like, I love what you've done with your boundaries. Beautiful thing. Boundaries are a beautiful thing, especially when they're spoken and they're clear and they're agreed to and understood as an organization or in mutual way. Boundaries, when I talk about boundaries, we are talking about limits. And in schools, I think we get hung up, we get stuck on the legal. We definitely address the legal. We do the modules, we have the officer come in, the lawyer come in to talk about the legal boundaries of working with other people's children. And that is important. Mandated reporting responsibility, not undercutting the importance of that. But what we forget are the professional, social, and emotional boundaries that also exist and are required in order to keep roles and responsibilities clear and relationships safe so that trust can grow. If I'm unclear if you're my mental health therapist or my friend or my parent or you're my teacher, I'm not exactly sure how to engage with you. And I might push those boundaries because I just don't understand the roles and rules of our relationship. And then when the educator wants to care and do all and meet the need, then extra confusion occurs. And I work.
But also, that's what, not to interrupt, but that's what adolescents do. Like that's their job to like figure out where the boundaries are. And so if they're blurred or they're not sure, then it's a fun time trying to figure out where that line is. Like, can I step on the line, or just can my toe be on the line? Can I hover over the line? Like that is the job. And so it is our job to make sure that we make sure that those boundaries are crystal clear. So
100% agree with you. And recently had a conversation with an educator who said students continue to push my boundaries and they need to understand my boundaries. And I'm so tired. I'm answering emails so late at night. I'm responding to, they need to respect my boundary. And I said, help me understand, like, they or you, like, who's responsible here? And she said, I know that I don't have the control. Like, I like a clean inbox and I don't like waking up in the morning to any emails there. It bothers me. So if they email me at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, I'm going to respond. So I'm trying to tell them not to, because that's a boundary of mine.
Responding.
In that, so,
delay send.
Yes.
You can do it. I promise.
What are the things? So then we really unpacked, like, this is leading to you having a lack of sleep or you losing family time. It's obviously a path to burnout. It's not sustainable. You're asking someone else to respect your boundary when there's strategies you could take to set it for yourself and hold it. And we, again, like the work email being turned off at a certain time, devices being turned off at a certain time, and whatever you say to students, stick to it. Because if you say you don't respond to emails on weekends and then you do,
then that means you do.
Correct. Or you only do to those students and not those students.
Oh yeah, there's another problem.
Yeah. So this is where policy and rules and schools and school leaders sticking up for educators and holding a line for a reason and explaining it. Like, we are a school that does not answer emails on the weekends.
Yep.
It is not allowed.
Right? Full stop.
And that is for your protection and everyone's
and
protection.
Ours.
Because, and then, as I always say, boundary work is teamwork. Because if we work in school together, my ability to uphold my boundaries is directly linked to your willingness and ability to uphold yours. Because if you allow something and I don't, I become the meanie, you're the cool teacher, and the fundamentals of trust, relationships, and boundaries really break down. And so if we're really prioritizing building authentic connection with youth, we have to do it as a team. We can all do it in our unique way, but it's got to be done as a team.
But we still have to uphold the same standards.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So what are the most common mistakes adults make when trying to build trust with young people, especially in student life work where relationships are key? They're so central.
Mm-hmm. Everyone has a unique story in this area, and I work with lots of people and coach lots of people and have conversations where it's all very different, school to school and individual to individual. But if I were to make a general statement about what I see most often, especially with student life professionals, it would be prioritizing likability over authentic connection.
Yeah. Yep, that happens all the time. Everyone, people want to be like that's a natural reaction, right? Like, people want to be liked, but at what expense, right?
Yep.
And so once you've kind of figured out kind of that's the thing, I think the other thing that sometimes happens is that you sometimes cross boundaries to make that happen, right? So that you feel like you can be liked. How do you know when you've crossed a boundary, when your relationship with the students become unhealthy? Give us some warning signs.
One-to-one. Yeah. That's a really good question. So we just put out a quiz. It's more general than what you're asking, and I'll get to the one-on-one adult to student question. But there's a quiz right now anyone can take, and it's the too loose, too rigid, just right. And because I often talk about boundaries from being too loose, but there's a whole population of adults working in schools where the boundaries are too rigid and there's too much of a distance. They'd never earn the trust of a young person or a connection with a young person because they're keeping them too far away.
Right.
So it's not just about too loose, but also too rigid. And our aim is to get it just right. Mm-hmm. The specific indicators, two ways I see educators blurring boundaries in a big way that's undermining trust with students. And this came from student focus groups.
Okay.
Students said the number 1 and 2 reasons that they didn't trust adults. The first was oversharing. When adults we heard interesting stories about adults sharing about their marriages or divorces, about infertility, about adoption woes, about car accident, about name the thing happening in an adult's life. That those topics coming up in chemistry or history so and every school is a little different on what they allow and every grade level, and age would be different. Certainly sharing some of ourselves as common connection and interest is important, but oversharing and using young people as a replacement for a friend or a therapist is really extremely detrimental. And this was high school students that sensed that and often said, like, don't you have a friend? Why are you telling this to me? I mean, they recognize it. They also recognize they can get an adult off track and not focus on the chemistry if for the math, if they get them going on some other topics. So, but for them to identify it as a boundary blur and a trust breaker, I found really interesting from high school students to name that. So the first was oversharing. The second was outward sharing. And students, this was really curious to me too. Students felt like their every move, their every conversation, their every statement could potentially be shared beyond the wall of that moment. So whether that teacher has their own TikTok or Instagram and was like truly filming and sharing that, or one story was a student was at the grocery store and she was with her mom at the grocery store and ran into another parent of one of her friends who said, you know, your teacher shared with me you're having trouble in Spanish and thought I could help you. Like, would you? And that student could recognize that there was care there, that people were, but felt totally exposed in that teacher sharing about that student's progress in that class. So oversharing and outward sharing were the top two. A close third was this playing pretend and really like pretending to be my friend or pretending to be like a therapist in my life or pretending to be my parent. And the students recognizing like they may have had a part in that to begin with, but that the adult should have corrected course and explained to them what a teacher is and isn't and the limits of their role. So oversharing, outward sharing, playing pretend were the top three boundary blurs. That's
outward sharing. I'd never even thought about that term before.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it was. And that came directly from students. I can't take credit.
Fair enough.
And then to your question though, of one-to-one, you know, how do I know if in a moment or in, you know, over time with one particular student that I am experiencing some boundary blurs and when and where do I need to reset? We see the typical things you hear in trainings like secrets. And anytime anyone says that, they jump to like the worst case. But I've heard just that, you know, they let you use their key for this, or they allow you to use their cell phone so it's like, I'm not jumping to like egregious sexual relationships or anything like that, which is another conversation we could have. It's certainly happening in schools and certainly something that needs attention. But there's lots of other behaviors, secrets around other things that can erode trust and really cause concern. When an educator is making their own rules, so, you know, the school says this, but I'll let you do this or just this once. And if you're their only, so one trusted adult, the minimum, many better. Yeah. But if you become the only and they won't talk to someone else, then we've either put ourselves in the hero seat or the savior seat, and we've done that. No matter how you landed there, it's an important time to reset and ensure that when you are unavailable, there is another adult that student can and will go to.
Absolutely.
Just a few indicators.
That's great. And so we think about setting boundaries because that's super important. But you want to set them without making students feel rejected or thinking that we don't care about them. So how do you do that?
I believe upfront conversations from the start are crucial. I always say what is and what isn't. We actually have a poster that can be downloaded for free on onetrustedadult.com that outlines, while I'm not your parent or guardian, I am a promoter of your potential. While I'm not your therapist, I'm an advocate for your needs. And we have lesson plans that introduce the ABCs. So when you can expect me to be accessible, what you can expect from my boundaries, and how I express my care. I truly believe we can program this in. We can have conversations big, all school meeting. There's a video that we've offered that for free on YouTube that people can show to students. I've had an incredible story recently of a school that has a one trusted adult identification day. Okay. And It's inspired by the book, and they took it and they ran with it. And in an all-school meeting, they show the video on what a trusted adult is, accessible, boundaried, caring, what that looks like, why it's important for you to go 50% of the way, student, in engaging with the adult mentors around you.
Sure.
And then those students actually write note cards to as many adults on campus as they want,
Oh, nice.
identifying them as a trusted adult in their life. The wellness director actually compiles all that, makes this giant list to ensure students have somebody. If they don't have someone, she meets with them to talk about why at their school they believe this is really important and works to identify someone for them. They use that database all year long. If a student's struggling, having a hard time, that these are adults they might reach out to make sure they connect with them, check in with them. So it's a really important database that can help a student life department. But it also signals to students, it's an education point on what you can expect from the adults at school and what you shouldn't.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that concept.
Yes.
And that's, that's helpful on both ends, because I think you see how the adults are connected and the students are connected to each other, and how connected the students feel in the community, but also looking on the adult side of things. Like, are there adults who aren't connected and aren't connecting with kids? And so that's another conversation to think about as well.
You would. Your assessments, you would go there. I love that. I had not.
I kind of have to.
Yeah, that's so.
Because if there's an adult on campus who's got, one or two, and, everything else is kind of evenly distributed, then you have to think about what's happening with that adult. Are they too rigid?
Right. Yeah.
Could that be it?
Yeah.
Could it be something else? And so we want to make sure that the adults are okay too.
Absolutely.
We spend a lot of time making sure that the students are okay, but we have to make sure that the adults are okay.
Absolutely.
And so thinking about the adults, and, because we talk about how, we talked about in our presentation, our workshop together, staff well-being alongside student development, and how boundaries protect not just students, but the professionals who serve them. And so I guess my question is, talk about the well-being side of things in terms of how important that is for staff to be okay so that the students can be okay. How do you talk about that with the adults on campus?
Yeah, it's baked in and central to all of the trainings and conversations and in the book, because if the adults aren't well, there's no chance that the kids will be well. So we do talk about this from the top. And what I really appreciate about working with you and the event that we designed for the student life leaders was we talked about how leaders approach their staff, and that relationship becomes how staff approach students. So, and replace staff with faculty, whatever the word is.
Whatever the word is. Yeah.
That the ABCs and this thought on protection of youth and protection of you and sustainability has to be at the core of everything that we're thinking about and doing. I think the emotional boundaries for most people that I work with who are struggling with sustainability or feeling like they can't go on with this work, the emotional boundaries and limits are something that really need to do some deep work on, because certainly there are demands from the leaders and demands from the school that cannot be denied. Right. But there are also demands we put on ourselves and expectations we've given others to expect of us. That we feel, every year I'm the one that provides all the cookies at the XYZ event. And that's something I've placed on myself. Dorm duty, I always provide popcorn and soda. Like what is it that you've done because you're in an invisible competition with your colleagues that you might just want to drop out of that race? And what is it because what behaviors are you using to achieve likability with students and instead of authentic connection? I think those are the ways we can assess our own practices to ensure we're not adding to our own demise. And I'm speaking from a very, very personal place of setting up expectations for others to have of me that I could not sustain. And then it devastated me that I couldn't meet a bar that I created for myself.
For yourself. Yep. I think a lot of us has been there in education. It happens so often. And I can certainly say that's something that I struggled with myself also, because you pour yourself into this work. You want to do the best that you can. You want to be everything for everyone. And then the end of the day,
Yep.
you end up being a pile of nothing because you have
Exactly.
poured out to everyone else.
Exactly.
You didn't put the oxygen mask on yourself first. So that's, one of the things that I say to people all the time. You got to take care of yourself. You got to make sure you've got those boundaries. But you got to care for yourself first.
And
Super
sometimes
important.
the magic in working with students comes from an unexpected place where you were caring for yourself. And I have a great example. I was in this hockey shootout. It was a benefit. It was a lot of fun. And I was sitting in the locker room. So I think there were 6 or 7 of us. And in the locker room, I was chatting with a woman who was also in it, who had not really skated much before and had never played hockey.
Okay.
And she was a school leader.
She's in a shootout?
Yes.
Okay.
It was a fun one. I was dressed as a hot dog. There was a pink unicorn. It was silly.
Got it.
But we were in the locker room between periods chatting. And I said, what made you do this? And she said, oh, well, I want to be a model for my kids of just trying something new and being vulnerable and being silly. And it's just been fun for me because I've actually gone out. I think it was like the 4th or 5th grade, always go skating once a week at her school. And she's like, so as a school leader, I decided I'll learn to skate with them. Yeah. And there's this young man, she had a name for him, but he's always like running away from school or trying not to come to school. They've got attendance issues basically. And she's tried everything from home visits to calls to written letters to a special mentorship. Like there was they had taken every strategy in the book that you could name. They have implemented to try to get the student to come to school and stay at school. And she said, wouldn't you know, the thing that I do for fun, for joy, a little hobby on the side, learn to skate, to do this benefit, ends up I'm in skating class with this young boy who keeps running away from school. And, he sees me as the principal or the leader. And so he doesn't really want to come near me, but then he sees that I cannot skate and he's a very good skater. And so can you teach me? Can you help me? All of a sudden, this young man is teaching the school leader how to skate. Then she's got a stick in her office now, so he can come down and teach her how to stick handle, and gave her advice. And she had to record herself at the shootout to bring back to show the video to him. And all of a sudden, a relationship is born out of an interest, out of her doing something for herself for fun, rather than by burning herself out, following every single strategy and trying XYZ. It was like when she went and did something joyful for herself, she then found a moment of connection with a student that really needed it. So just that example, that is the oxygen mask. Self-care, people think pedicures and bubble baths and massages. There's so many ways to care for yourself that can actually lead to an energy about you that makes you more accessible to students and those around you.
Absolutely. I love that. That's a beautiful story. So what's one thing that student life professionals can do this week to become more intentional about building trust while protecting their own capacity?
I think an ABC assessment is something everyone should journey into. And I would love to connect with people, but we look at the ABCs as these giant bubbles. And if we're overly accessible, it becomes a resentment bubble and it's going to burst. And so an assessment for myself would be, in what ways am I signaling to those around me when I'm accessible, how I'm accessible, that I'm present and that I'm interested? And where are ways I can pull back? Is it, the main question being, is this sustainable?
Right.
And then go to the C, in what ways am I indicating that I care about their work, care about their progress, care about the institution, organization as a whole? And in what ways, if I overcare, if I'm too emotionally attached to the outcomes specifically of individuals, that's a savior syndrome bubble waiting to burst. And it will eventually go and we will be a resentment burnout blob on the ground. So I would really encourage people to be thinking about, from that lens, your relationships with students and those adults that you lead. How and where am I accessible? What are the boundaries and limits to that? And how am I caring? What are the boundaries and limits to that? As just a starting point. And I ask people to write their job description through that lens, but don't write it for yourself. Write it for your successor. Who's going to take your job someday? And what guidance would you give them about being accessible, boundaried, and caring? And that becomes the recipe for ourselves in our current practice. We feel we're caught in habits that can't be reset and people depend on us but there's always an opportunity to reset. If what you're doing is unsustainable, find opportunity for reset.
Love that. Brooklyn, what keeps you passionate about this work?
Ever evolving. I see change. I see the schools that we work with who are running book studies, who are taking the online courses, who are implementing advisory programming or student leadership programming. Most of them began where 40 to 50% of students would say that they have a trusted adult at school. And if you dug into that data, within the 40 or 50% that said they had someone, they would name the same 3 or 4 adults at school or on a campus. That emotional labor on those 3 or 4 adults, right? Heavy. And usually those adults are named for really good reasons. Sometimes those are the 3 or 4 adults that are named because they are prioritizing likability over authentic connection and really setting every other adult up for failure with students.
Yeah.
So with this work, we've seen an increase in both numbers. The number of students who are naming an adult a trusted adult at school, and the number of adults across the school that they're naming. When I see that kind of change in a school or youth serving organization, I can't help but be incredibly passionate and excited because there's real change coming from this work and from this focus. It's not, the literature will agree that these relationships matter, but nowhere will you find a framework or strategies to do it well and do it sustainably.
I love that. And so as we close today, tell the audience kind of what you do specifically for schools, how people can get in touch with you.
Yeah, onetrustedadult.com is the best way to look at all of what we offer. And everything has come by request of educators and youth serving professionals. So what began as Brook in a book, we say, has grown into individual course online. And then educators said, we love that, but we also want to take it with our colleagues and have discussions. So then we created a group course. They said, we want parents and guardians to have the same language we have so that we can have a similar vocabulary across our entire community when we're talking about kids and what they need in our approaches. So we created a parent and guardian program. There's lots for adults. There's also advisory programming. I know you and I have talked about this endlessly, but schools who are assigning an adult to look out for the whole child and advocate as an advisor or specific mentor, those programs, the intention is phenomenal. We can't rely on that. You can't assign a trusted adult, right? Trust is earned. Trust is earned. But advising and assigning adult indicates relationships are important. We want you to have an adult you go to. Often trust does grow out of those. Sometimes not. That's okay. You won't be everybody's somebody. But what we have to do at that time is be really intentional about what we fill it with. Some schools leave it completely open and the advisors say, what am I supposed to do with these students for half an hour a week? I don't know. Some educators, great, connect 4, Uno, jump right into some kind of connection. And some really struggle. Other schools pack it so full of health and wellness and other curricula that it suffocates any opportunity for natural connection to occur. So we know presence, play, possibility are the 3 ingredients to healthy advisory programming and curriculum. And that's what we've created for high schools and middle schools. So the Ripple program for middle school, Be Bold for high school. And then we also created student leadership programs that student life leaders should definitely check out because we've seen a variety of ways schools are implementing them, including students are required to complete them before they can campaign or become candidates for student leadership in the following year. Nice. So some really interesting ways that these programs have been implemented. And it's all about positive culture shift.
I love that. You have been busy, my friend.
Very busy. Very busy.
But thank you so much. It's been so great to reconnect with you. You know, Absolutely. We first met. You came to the Roundtable Conference so many years ago. So it's nice to be back in touch with you and co-presenting with you. So and also being here on the Table podcast. So thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to co-presenting again. I think lots of synergy here with Bridget's work and my work, and I thank you for everything that you do.
No, absolutely. And so, this conversation about being a trusted adult and holding healthy boundaries and recentering student life around what's sustainable is work that every one of us in this field needs to be doing. And so happy to be partnering with you in this way. So, if you want to learn more about Brooklyn's work, check out her newly released second edition of One Trusted Adult, How to Build Strong Connections and Healthy Boundaries with Young People. I'm pretty sure it's available everywhere. And we'll include Brooklyn's website information and resources in the show's notes. The Dean's Roundtable is now on Instagram and TikTok. Follow us for leadership insights, community building resources, and conversations that matter to student-like professionals. Just search for the Dean's Roundtable on both platforms, and please join the conversation. If you are enjoying the table, don't forget to subscribe, share it with a friend, or leave us a review. It really helps more people find us. And finally, thanks for pulling up a chair at the table today. I hope this conversation gave you something to think about, or maybe even something to try out in your own community. And as always, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll see you next time at the table. Have a good one.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Table podcast series. Is your student life program delivering on your mission? Our new K-12 student life assessment moves you beyond anecdotes to evidence-based decisions. Through comprehensive stakeholder surveys and expert analysis, you'll get concrete insights across 8 essential dimensions of student life, from culture and wellness to staff effectiveness and resource allocation. We're seeking founding partner schools to be the first to experience this transformative assessment process and help shape the future of student life evaluation. Today's episode was hosted by Bridget Johnson in conversation with Dr. Brooklyn Raney, produced and edited by Andrew Sigmund and music by freemusic.com. For any questions, contact information can be found in the episode description. And as always, thanks again for listening.